This second email from Captain Stubbs. He says, "Hey Reeves and the crew, longtime listener, first time emailer. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the recent mandatory 6-day work week for CD Projekt Red until the Cyberpunk 2077 releases. I've seen arguments either way online, and I'm curious about your thoughts on the matter. Personally, I don't like to see it mandatory from the head of the company. I'd rather see it as an option for employees, but I understand why management is in a tough spot. Thanks for the podcast and all you guys do." So, this news came out, was it this last week? CD Projekt Red, the heads are saying, "Hey, we know we said we weren't going to do crunch, but hey, it turns out this game is huge and we're getting really close to the wire here. We need to get this done." So, we're instituting 6-day work weeks for the entire company. What do you guys think about that?
Sounds like someone dropped their mic or something because of it.
I dropped my 6th day.
Right.
Ah,
Oh, I do have thoughts.
Mm.
Shocker, I know. Okay, so I think with this one's a little bit trickier because I've been covering crunch in this industry for a long time. And I feel like there's a really important difference though with CD Projekt Red. One, the compensation is above and beyond what they're already getting. Two, it's a short term before launch. And from what I understand from talking to a few people there, there was a discussion on, do we want to delay the game again or do we want to do this? And from what I heard, it was a mass majority saying that they agreed to the 6-day work week. There's another important aspect, and I will never advocate for crunch. I was in the military where we worked 15, 18-hour days, 7 days a week for 11 to 12 months. I will never advocate for crunch. But also, the Polish working system and cultural attitudes towards employment and production is very different than how it is here. And not advocating for it, but the attitude in Polish development, even though the game development over there is still relatively small, it's very different from the work-to-workday basis. And in terms of crunch, everyone I've talked to that's over there has not seen it as a crunch. And from what I'm understanding, is that it wasn't just a random drop of this is now mandatory. From what I understand, is there was a discussion beforehand about weighing the different options. Did I talk to every single person at CD Projekt Red? No. But there's another important part of this that I really feel like doesn't get addressed, and especially with a lot of those like kind of not clickbait, but like deliberately inflammatory headlines, is that it's I don't know. I'm kind of
It's a complicated issue.
it's a complicated issue, and the fact that the day that they went gold, the conversation came back in flux. And I've talked to a couple of the devs that said they were like so excited to share people the news that it was gold. And one person directly told me, she was like, "I'm almost scared to sound proud of what we did." She's like, "I'm scared of what people are going to say if I say I'm proud of the work we did." And you shouldn't be scared to say what you've done. And this thing has been in production for how long? You earn the right to be proud of what you did. You earn the right. Do you feel burnt out? Do you feel taken advantage of? And she said no. And I'm like, then be proud, like be excited, celebrate this, pop open the champagne and freaking celebrate, because there's a time and a place, to talk about these conversations, and you can have these very important conversations without completely taking a crap on the entire effort that went into these games. Because crunch, the burst of production and productivity, it's not new. It needs to be heavily monitored, but the conversation should not overtake everything, especially in the terms like this where there is the cultural difference that I don't think a lot of outlets that are covering this, and I've read almost every coverage of it because I'm very interested in work-life balance and that kind of progression. But feel like a lot of this coverage that I'm seeing out there is completely negating the cultural differences between work environments, between Poland work environments, and really equating it to the US. And as much as we like to think that the US is the center of the world, it's not. And there's a different attitude towards what is perceived as crunch and what is perceived as a last stretch of development, if that makes sense. Sorry, comment
Yeah.
section.
No, those are really good thoughts. I don't think I can follow them. So, Dan?
I think, Leon had a lot to say about this. Again, I'm not up to speed 100% on this, but I will say, this instance of crunch is not like the team crunching for a year or 2 years or something like that. It's sort of like, a reality of any deadline-driven environment. is that sometimes near the finish line, things are going to ramp up. I'm sure we've all dealt with that here at Game Informer during some of those special cover stories where things have to come together at the last minute. Sometimes it just happens. Um, and I don't think there's any real solution to that. Like when any kind of software development, actually, I think when you get close to the end there's going to be some kind of crunch. Like it doesn't matter how far you set the date out, things change. The world has changed in the last year. So despite what was said, the reality is things change. Everything is fluid, and whatever. It's 6 weeks that they're getting paid for, right?
Yeah. No, I mean,
overtime for.
Right. Okay.
which is great, and I think, yeah, I don't even know where to start. It's just like kind of
But I don't think at the same
making
time
games is hard,
it is extremely difficult,
and
I don't
figuring
think.
out when it's going to come out is super hard too.
By the same token, I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough about this particular topic to weigh in with any kind of authority. So what I think about this is actually incredibly irrelevant. We should care about what the people think about it who are, working there, and pretty much nobody else.
I think, Liana, you had a really good point of like, do they feel taken advantage of? And maybe some of them do. We didn't talk to everybody. So hopefully they don't, though. And I think that's kind of like the main problem that people have had with crunch is that people are being taken advantage of. And so that practice really needs to stop. And hopefully we can support the industry and support the games we love and encourage developers to do better. I think CD Projekt Red is trying here. Like, it definitely had some trouble here, and like, was this the perfect solution? I don't know, but hopefully they're moving in the right direction. It sounds like this is better than the crunch they've experienced in the past. I'll say that.
And I do wonder how much this would have blown up if we didn't have them on record saying that they would not crunch this game.
And the coverage was framed around that too. It wasn't so much the act of the 6-day work week that it was framed with that, like, well, this is what they said, and there was a tweet that went out directly referencing that previous. And I feel like with that kind of thing where there's so much nuance and so much context that is missing in a 140 character tweet, it's dangerous, especially when you have people that don't like to click on articles. They like to knee-jerk reaction based off of a headline. And if these headlines only say part of the story, that's something that I've seen a lot of developers go after journalists of like, hey, your story is wrong. Like, I was there, you were not. Like, don't speak, you're advocate for us, but don't speak over us. And I worry that that's happening a lot here, because a lot of people that are weighing in on it aren't asking the developers themselves. They're not looking at cultural differences. They're not looking at what was previously said in the whole context. They aren't looking at how they've changed. CD Projekt Red's culture has changed a lot in the last 18 months. They've done a lot. They've been listening to feedback. They've been listening. And I feel like that should play a part. I've worked in jobs before where we were required, especially a previous job where we did a lot of events and production. And there were times where I think it was like 2 hours of sleep a night because we needed to do it. And that sucked. It really sucked. But if there's a conversation about it with the people, I think if it's a decision made by the higher ups, there's no conversation, and there's like, you do this, that's an issue. But I also think we should allow, especially Dan, you mentioned this perfectly, and so did you, Ben. I've got a cat. Hi, baby.
Oh my God.
Hi,
That's
Sophie.
so cute.
She has opinions.
Yeah.
Her, even though she's a girl, her name is Coltrane from Gears.
That's
So
adorable.
good.
Kitty.
It's adorable little kitty.
Yeah.
Little kitty, little guest star.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a very nuanced thing, and every report of crunch should be handled on a developer by developer basis, because there's aspects that a lot of people know, and there's a lot of people that are weighing in that have no idea how development works. They don't know. Well, they think one person makes an entire game, and that's not how that works. There's a
That
lot of
hasn't happened
details.
for like 30 years, probably. But yeah, like, I could see if I was on the development team, I could see myself being like, you know what? Let's just get this done. 6 more weeks. I want to get this game out the door, because they want the game to be done as much as the fans want to have it in their hands, right? They want to have the game done and out the door and let people enjoy the thing they've been working on, I'm sure. So yeah, I don't know. All that to say is it's very complicated, and I know we said it earlier. I just want to say it again. We're not pro crunch by any means. So
Right.
hopefully that did not
No.
come across that way. Definitely is something we'd like to do away with.
But look, we had a nuanced conversation about it. It's a beautiful thing. Maybe social media can't give us all the answers. Shocking.
Pretends to be shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why Instagram, photos, that's all you need. That's what the internet's good for. Pictures.
Oh, love it.
You're listening to the gamesindustry.biz podcast. I'm James Batchelor, and I'm joined this week by
Rebecca Valentine.
And Marie D'Alessandri.
We're going to be talking about the biggest stories of the past week, starting with CD Projekt Red enforcing mandatory crunch on Cyberpunk 2077. Now, this emerged earlier this week. It was kind of one of those kind of reportedly, sources suggest it was all came from Bloomberg, Jason Schreier over on Bloomberg, but studio head Adam Dowski basically came out and essentially confirmed it on Twitter. People at CD Projekt Red who are working on the development of Cyberpunk 2077 are now being forced to work 6-day weeks. They will be required to work their usual week plus some nights and at least 1 day weekend per weekend. That's in the run-up to the November 19th launch. The game has gone to certification for Sony and Microsoft. The game is kind of, in theory, like the game is done, and this is probably some massive day one patch that we can expect to sort out any kind of bugs and kinks. Now, crunch on a big AAA project is not exactly news. Sadly, it's not exactly unusual. But what was particularly galling in this case was Badowski himself and one of the studio co-founders last year, in an interview, when Jason Schreier said, we have a non-obligatory crunch policy. So we may ask people to work extra hours, but we will never demand that they do so. It is entirely optional. Mm-hmm. Polish labour laws do mean that people do get paid overtime, so it's not unpaid crunch, but that doesn't make it any better. And yeah, just the idea of, I think, what is it, 8 weeks now until till launch, and everyone's having to crunch on this, having a year ago been told, no, we're not going to ever force you to do this because, you know, we don't want to be that studio. And now they are very much that studio.
Okay, so we've talked on this podcast about crunch a lot because it keeps coming up. And one of the things that we have said in the past is that a sort of positive change we have seen in the industry is that now more people seem comfortable talking openly about how sucky crunch is, right? Like, there's articles about it all the time. It comes out. It's becoming more of a thing that you could talk about, whereas, you know, maybe, I don't know precisely how long ago, but maybe 5-10 years ago, it was sort of this unspoken thing that everyone accepted. And now that we have more articles, more people, you know, openly talking about it, it's there's sort of a pressure existing right now, right? On companies to maybe get their shit together. So that's something that we've talked about before. Now, this is galling. This is very, very frustrating because, so on top of what you just said, James, about, you know, they said, okay, yeah, we're not going to crunch on this. We're not going to do it. No mandatory crunch. So the original story was back in May of last year. It was over at Kotaku, Jason Schreier also. And the premise that he set up this story on is that he was trying to book an E3 appointment for Cyberpunk 2077, you know, just like a normal go play the game, talk about it, whatever. And CD Projekt Red reached out to him to put him in touch with the studio head and director of this game, specifically to talk about working conditions. Because CD Projekt Red, I believe it was Witcher 3, that had some real wild, bad crunch in its development. I think that's correct.
It was like a year of crunch.
Yeah, so they had a history. Yeah, they absolutely had a history, and they were like, hey, we want to talk about this. We want to talk about how we're going to do better. Like, this is very much a move to get some good PR, right? That's exactly what it was. And that story was kind of fascinating because, as the kids are saying now, they came out of that story looking real sus, right? Like, just real suspicious, because when you read that old article from May, it very much reads like... It reads like me trying to have a conversation with my parents about whether or not they're social distancing or not. Because, you know, I go talk to them and they're like, oh yeah, we're social distancing. And then they proceed to tell me like 5 things they're doing that are very not safe things to be doing. You know, going out to eat in crowded restaurants and not wearing masks in grocery stores. And I'm like, wait, didn't you just say? So at the top of this article, they're like, no mandatory crunch. But then like you keep reading and you're like, wait, no mandatory crunch. But they're still asking people to stay extra hours. They're just not making it obligatory, which as we know from all these other crunch stories, this sort of pressure to, oh, well, you don't have to stay. You're not going to get fired if you don't stay, but everyone else is staying over the weekend and working extra hours. So, I mean, if you don't, I mean, it's up to you. You can make the choice, right? That's exactly what it looks like. Like, that whole article is very much, and this is not me knocking on Jason Schreier. I mean, he did good reporting. I'm talking about specifically CD Projekt Red coming in and being like, oh yeah, you know, we're not crunching. Look at our good PR. We get the headline. We're not going to crunch on this game. And they have like this very specific line at the end. This is from the article back in May. CD Projekt Red approached me because they wanted to make a public commitment to their employees' health. It's a pledge that they say they want to be public so that employees can hold them to it. If a developer wants to opt out of crunch or take time off and their manager is resistant, perhaps they can say that they read on Kotaku that it was okay. Maybe that'll work, or maybe it won't. And guess what? It didn't work, folks. It did not work. And they just came back, and it happened anyway. And this is not surprising, right? Like, this is not shocking to anyone, but I just think it's like kind of really galling of them to a year ago come forward and try to get this big good PR move by saying that we're going to do this thing that is just this horrible thing that is consuming the industry. We're not going to do it. We're going to be better now. And then they're just, you know, going to come back around and say, well, we exhausted every other option, so guess we have to do mandatory crunch or whatever. So this is just like deeply ridiculous to me. I am so glad that Kotaku did that piece last year so that it's out in public. I don't actually think that's making any kind of difference, but it is like useful to sort of like hold the two pieces together and be like, well, we can't trust these guys anymore. And I think that it's something that can definitely be pointed to in the future when studios say, yeah, no, we're not going to. We're planning on not. Well, okay, what's your plan for that? And what happens when you get down to the wire and you find that you don't have enough time to make a video game without exploiting your workers?
So
rant over, sorry.
No, that was great.
It's a good rant.
Yeah.
It's a good rant. At the risk of talking in CD Projekt Red's defense briefly, very, very briefly, and perhaps undeservedly. No. Bear with me.
Okay.
This is kind of defense, but also further criticism. Like, it's even more disappointing because I can see in some ways that they have tried to avoid this, in that Cyberpunk was originally due for release in April, and they pushed it back to September, and then they pushed it further back to November. And that to me suggests that, you know what, they recognised there's too much work here. We're not going to crunch people like, you know, from Christmas to April. We will push it back further. We'll get they've had an extra 7 months in the hopes, I imagine, of, you know, at least part of that 7 months has been in the hopes of not crunching, or at least minimising the amount of crunch they have to do. Also, there's just the sheer scope of Cyberpunk 2077, just from the looks of it. Like, it's going to be, you know, large open world games are complicated to develop, and like they are going to inevitably end up with bugs and glitches and so forth. And you think the sheer hype and anticipation for this game, if it comes out in November and it's buggy as hell, it's going to get absolutely just slated by the reviews. And this game needs to do well, because I think CD Projekt Red have invested so much of it. I wonder how much of the company's financial fortunes rely on this game to an extent. I know The Witcher had a sudden surge of interest and so forth, but okay, apart from the fact that The Witcher has been doing fairly well over the last 6 years and got a proper boost last year, like, they don't release the games that often, so they need this one to be good, because we're looking at a good few years before we get a Witcher 4. Someone also kind of pointed out to me that the reason they're probably not delaying it again is because there's probably, by this point, there's loads of marketing and stuff in place. I mean, certainly they've been doing those Nightwire episodes, like the little half-hour broadcast of game info, and all the trailers end with November 19th. I assume there's a ton of massive marketing coming up October, November, which now would be too expensive or too much of a loss to cancel. But it's still just really, really disappointing. Like, and I'm gonna pull out a couple of Badowski's quotes again. So apparently this is reportedly from the internal email that was sent to staff, being told, you now have to work 6-day weeks. I take it upon myself to receive the full backlash for this decision. I know this is in direct opposition to what we've said about crunch. It's also in direct opposition to what I personally grew to believe a while back, that crunch should never be the answer. But we've extended all other possible means of navigating the situation. I think this means that, okay, let's be very, very generous and say that CD Projekt Red believed that they could create this epic, huge, massive masterpiece without crunching, and that turns out to be not to be the case. It almost feels like a major studio now is saying, like, there literally is no escaping crunch.
But that,
So as much as we
that is so not okay. It's bullshit. Absolutely.
No, I agree. I agree. It's bullshit. Like you can always delay the game or cut stuff back.
Yeah, and there are reasons they're not doing that, right? And like I get it. There are like business reasons they're not doing that, but those business reasons do not trump well-being of workers, right? Like that's like absolute nonsense. Like decisions were made at different points along here that led to this point. At some point, someone should have looked at this, and either they did and decided it was worth it, or they didn't look at it, their pipeline correctly, and they should have. But at some point, someone was looking at this and knew this was a possibility and did not, take the steps to avoid it, right? Like
absolutely. I think that's really the thing that's bothering me the most. Like this quote that we've extended all of the possible means of navigating this situation. No, absolute bullshit. I am so tired of this. I am so tired of like CD Projekt Red getting a pass for everything and like not for everything. Sorry, I'm just angry now. But just this makes no sense whatsoever. And like Rebecca was saying earlier, that this isn't even surprising. And that's the worst bit of this situation, is like they keep promising stuff that they actually do not respect. And at this point, I truly believe that this company has no respect for its staff. Like genuinely, it is beyond my understanding that you could, after the statements they made in the past, now be like, oh yeah, we're making crunch mandatory. Like there are examples of games out there that have like a large scope that have been made without crunch. And like, while I totally understand the need at the end of a project to like put in a few more hours here and there is nothing for me that like justifies making your health, putting your health in danger. There is nothing that I can understand about this situation. And what really bothers me is I feel there's multiple reasons why Cyberpunk is a game I'm not going to buy, despite the fact I really do want to. But if I need any more reasons, this is the one. And unfortunately, I think it's not going to change anything. People are still going to buy this game. They're going to say it's amazing, and everyone is going to forget that crunch is how this game happened. And this is driving me crazy. And I am so tired of having this conversation. And please, people, unionize so we can avoid that shit ever happening again, because like I'm so done with it. Sorry, I swear. Maybe
you're absolutely right, and I think that's the thing, right? Like ultimately, we can write all the articles we want about it, and we can podcast all we want about it. Everyone can tweet all they want about how crunch is bad, but that is not going to change the sales. Writing about it and talking about it helps normalize it publicly, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? Like when they came out in the Kotaku article, back again like last year, at the end, he was like, we want our developers, we want our workers to hold us accountable, which, was, I guess, oddly prescient because, they were asking the press, to write about this, but the press can't hold them accountable. Their audience is not going to hold them accountable. The people that should be holding them accountable are the people who work for them. And I don't mean... I don't want to put extra onus on the people who are already, dealing with this, but that's ultimately where movement has to come from, right? Until the people who are in this industry decide that this is not tenable, this is not something that they will accept anymore, then this is just going to keep on happening. So yeah, collective action, get in there.
Get in there.
I wonder what happens next. I wonder if staff are inevitably going to push through and get to the end of this project. Because if you drop out of this game 8 weeks before the end, even if it's, I'd love to see some people drop out 8 weeks before the end for the sake of their health. That would be a good thing for them. But I can't see that happening. So I wonder if it will be kind of, certainly post-launch and certainly post-Christmas, if there will start to be kind of an exodus of some sort of staff from the studio, kind of I am not going through that again. You would hope that that's what happens, just as you would hope that players would not buy the game and not reward practices of crunch, but that's not going to happen. Completely on that note, and this is the least important concern, but I'm just intrigued, to you two. So Maria, you've already said you are not going to buy this game.
No, I mean,
in part now because in part because it's crunch. So I purposefully did not buy Red Dead Redemption 2 because we reported on that crunch, and because it sounded awful. And I was like, you know what? No, I don't want to be. I know I've heard that, like, do you know what, boycotting games doesn't actually help the staff who rely on the sales for bonuses or whatever the hell. But like, I thought, you know what, no, I'm not going to spend my money on something that has punished people. I'm not going to. And eventually it came on Game Pass, and I downloaded it and I had a quick go. And then when I was playing it, it was like, yes, okay, this is incredibly detailed, but at what cost? And the whole experience was tainted for me, and that's absolutely not an important concern compared to people literally burning out. But from an end user's point of view, how can you enjoy something knowing that actually this has killed people? And I've really been looking for Cyberpunk. It's been my most anticipated game of the year. It's been one of my most anticipated games since I saw the first gameplay at E3 a couple of years ago. And now I know if I do get it, I will be playing it and I'll be looking at every nuance, every detail, thinking, yeah, but at what cost?
James, with all due respect, like, people do that all the time. Like people constantly consume things that they know were manufactured or put together under like various shady conditions. And ultimately, I think you have to kind of like, make certain decisions, right? Like, for yourself. I mean, you're right. Like not me individually refusing to buy Cyberpunk is not going to materially harm anyone, right? Like boycotts in the games industry and boycotts in general don't tend to work. So I think you just ultimately have to make like your own personal ethical decisions, in how you feel about things. And I'm not really going to pass judgment on people who still want to play Cyberpunk or who want to play Red Dead. But I mean, yeah, you just, I don't know, you kind of got to make that decision for yourself. And I don't think that ultimately the vast majority of people, I don't think that the vast majority of people who buy Cyberpunk are even aware of this situation, because the vast majority are not deeply online reading Bloomberg and Kotaku. But I also think that those who do, the vast majority are not going to be so swayed that they're going to actively not buy a game they were going to buy anyways.
Personally, I know that I've always struggled to come to terms with the idea of buying Cyberpunk anyway. Like, when initially, I had little interest in Cyberpunk, then I did the Gamescom demo, and I thought it was fantastic. And then I saw other things about it, and I was like, okay, that's a game I really, really want to play. It looks amazing. And then there was this whole thing about the transphobic ad that they put in the game, and I was like, okay, this is so not okay. And then I felt like from that point onwards, it just kept getting worse. And like every new controversy, I was like, Jesus Christ, like, get a grip, like, this is ridiculous. And then the crunch reports, and then this, and I'm like, at this point, I'm just done with this studio, and I'm okay with it, because there will be plenty of other games for me to play. So, like, I'm okay with not playing Cyberpunk. I just can't, but that doesn't mean that people can't play it. Like, it's just my personal corner of the universe that has literally no impact in anyone, and I'm really happy if people can enjoy that game, and I have very close friends that will genuinely enjoy that game, and that is okay. And like, this is not me like trying to have an impact on, like, it's not a boycott, it's just like, I'm just done with them. That's it. That's it for me, Cyberpunk. Bye bye.